I never imagined a quick errand at the post office could spiral into a full-blown HOA disaster. But that's exactly how it unfolded. The moment I walked through the glass doors, there she was, Karen, the kind of neighbor who treated every minor inconvenience like a courtroom trial. She didn't hesitate, pointing her finger at me so sharply it looked like it could slice through paper. Her voice rang out, slicing through the steady hum of clerks and shuffling envelopes. "That mail isn't yours. You shouldn't even be holding it." I froze, not because I was guilty. My name was printed right there on the package. What stunned me was the sheer nerve of it. Karen had somehow appointed herself as neighborhood mail enforcer patrolling deliveries as though the HOA had deputized her. And today, apparently, I was her target. Before I could fire back, the postmaster stepped forward. Mr. Jacobs, the man who'd run that branch for decades, carried the kind of calm presence that made long lines feel less unbearable. He gave Karen a steady look, then turned toward me, shaking his head with the half-smile of someone who had seen it all before. "That mail," he said slowly, pointing at the box Karen was waving like a victory banner, "belongs to my retired father. I'm not sure why you think you can confiscate it." Karen's jaw fell open. Her bold accusation had just slammed into the immovable wall of fact. This wasn't her mail. It wasn't mine either, but it certainly didn't belong to her. Still, she wasn't ready to let go. She puffed up and launched into a tirade, rattling off imaginary HOA bylaws that supposedly granted her control over everyone's deliveries. I tried to keep a straight face, but Mr. Jacobs's expression shifted from mild amusement to quiet irritation, and I couldn't help smirking. The whole scene was absurd, a woman trying to impose her fantasy rules in a federal building where the actual authority stood 2 feet away. The tension was thick. This wasn't just about a misplaced package anymore. This was about control, ego, and the kind of obsessive entitlement that could turn neighbors into bitter rivals. Karen's voice grew louder as the line of customers shuffled uncomfortably. I knew then this wasn't ending quietly. She wanted a showdown, and I wasn't. About to back down, her glare was sharp enough to cut steel. Every set of eyes in the room trailed her movements, but nobody dared intervene. The only one standing firm was Mr. Jacobs, whose patience was visibly thinning. It felt like there was an invisible countdown ticking in the air. One wrong word from her, and this situation could explode. "What gives you the right to stop me from collecting what belongs to me?" she demanded, pacing like a lioness in a cage. She jabbed her finger toward the package with the zeal of a prosecutor presenting her final piece of evidence. Mr. Jacobs adjusted his glasses, leaning forward. Just slightly. His voice remained calm but resolute. "Ma'am, I've already asked you to step back. That package is addressed to my father. Postal regulations don't allow anyone other than the recipient to interfere." Karen's face flushed crimson. She clearly thought her HOA badge, or her reputation for constant complaints, would intimidate him. But Mr. Jacobs didn't budge. A faint smirk tugged at his lips, as though he had seen this same circus act too many times before. "You're abusing your so-called rules!" Karen shrieked. "As HOA representative, I have the right to make sure every resident follows proper protocol." I muttered under my breath, unable to resist. "Proper protocol? You mean your personal vendetta wrapped in HOA jargon?" Her head snapped toward me. Now I wasn't just a bystander. I was her opponent. Every ounce of her fury radiated toward me. She wasn't leaving until she proved herself the dominant force in that post office. Then, in a tone so steady it silenced the room, Mr. Jacobs spoke again. "My father is retired, ma'am. He lives here, gets his mail here, and no HOA rule gives anyone the authority to intercept it. If you persist, I'll have no choice but to involve law enforcement." The air went still. Even Karen faltered for a second, though she quickly tried to regain ground, flailing her hands and muttering about bylaws no one had ever seen. But the power in the room had shifted. She wasn't winning anymore. I felt vindicated. This wasn't just a petty squabble anymore. It was an open clash of authority, entitlement, and ego. Karen's every move was now digging her deeper into a battle she couldn't possibly win, but instead of retreating, she doubled down. Her fury fed on the silence, her foot stomping against the tile floor like a frustrated child. She huffed and puffed, clearly fuming that neither I nor Mr. Jacobs was bowing to her self-made authority. The other customers whispered quietly, "Spectators," to a slow-motion showdown too explosive to interrupt. "I don't care who your father is," Karen barked, jabbing her finger toward the package like it was evidence in a trial. "This neighborhood has rules, and I will enforce them. You people need to understand that." Mr. Jacobs drew in a long, steady breath, his eyes narrowing just enough to show the shift. It wasn't anger. It was the kind of gaze you'd see from someone who had weathered far worse and wasn't about to be rattled by a suburban tyrant. "Ma'am," he said evenly, "I've asked you politely. Step away. This is not your business." Karen, realizing her usual scare tactics weren't working, shifted gears. She leaned in closer, lowering her voice so only I could hear. "You think you're clever, don't you?" she hissed. "Walking around like you own this place, flaunting the rules. This isn't over." I held her stare without flinching. There was something deeply satisfying about watching her unravel in the face of actual resistance. For years, Karen had cornered neighbors with threats and phony authority, but today, she was undone by the simplest truth that the mail had a rightful owner and it wasn't her. "Miss," Mr. Jacobs interjected sharply, his patience thinning. "If you continue this behavior, I'll have no choice but to call the authorities. My father's mail is not up for debate." That hit her like a thunderclap. For the first time, she faltered. The threat of law enforcement pierced through the armor of false confidence she always wore. This wasn't the HOA clubhouse. This wasn't her playground. Here, her authority meant nothing. I saw the subtle shift in her posture. She stood straighter, as if trying to recover her dignity, but her twitching hands betrayed her. The cracks in her facade were showing. The HOA power she'd brandished so freely around the neighborhood crumbled in the face of actual federal rules. She glanced around, her eyes darting to the customers who were now openly watching. Some amused, some uncomfortable, but all of them witnesses to her public unraveling. That silent scrutiny weighed on her, pressing down heavier than any of Mr. Jacobs's words. For once, her theatrics weren't intimidating. They were embarrassing. With one final huff, she backed away from the counter, muttering about protocol and how this neighborhood needed better order. It wasn't a graceful retreat, but it was a retreat nonetheless. The room grew quiet again, as though someone had finally released the air valve on a boiling kettle. I let out a slow breath I hadn't realized I was holding, relief mixing with a quiet sense of triumph. The battle had ended, not with shouting or chaos, but with patience and the simple weight of truth. Yet deep down, I knew this wasn't the last time Karen would try something. This felt more like the pause before the next storm. At last, I stepped forward to the counter and picked up the package at the center of all the chaos. It was heavier than I expected, wrapped neatly, stamped with my name in bold letters alongside the Postmaster's mark. Just holding it gave me a sense of vindication, not just for myself, but for everyone in the neighborhood who had been smothered under Karen's manufactured authority. Mr. Jacobs caught my eye and gave me a knowing nod. "You handled yourself." "Well," he said with a small chuckle, "believe me, I've dealt with plenty of Karens in my time. They don't always go down this smoothly. You did good." I laughed softly, tension finally leaving my shoulders. He was right. This wasn't about a package anymore. It was about standing firm against someone who thrived on control. Today had tested my patience, my composure, and my ability to keep calm in the face of her storm. And for once, reason had won. As I turned to leave, I spotted Karen lingering near the door, muttering under her breath like a general regrouping after losing a battle. She scanned the room, glaring at the witnesses, who had dared to watch her defeat. I couldn't help the flicker of satisfaction that rose inside me. Today she had no victory to claim. Her imagined rules had dissolved under the weight of reality. Stepping outside into the daylight, I felt lighter, freer. Mail should be simple. Delivered, received, done. It should never become a battleground for ego and entitlement. Yet this whole ordeal reminded me how quickly petty disputes can spiral if people let them. I resolved then and there to stay vigilant but composed. Karen's energy was toxic, but I refused to let it poison mine. That afternoon, once home, I set the package down carefully on my kitchen counter. Mr. Jacobs's words echoed in my mind. Calm authority always outweighs noise and intimidation. Karen had tried to assert dominance, but law, logic, and patience had carried the day. Over the next few days, whispers of the post office drama rippled through the neighborhood. Neighbors exchanged knowing looks, quietly celebrating the rare moment when Karen's power fell flat. And while her pride may have been bruised, there was comfort in the reminder that truth, when handled wisely, has more weight than the loudest voice in the room. Life soon returned to its ordinary rhythm, but I carried the memory like a small, hard-earned victory, standing firm, respecting boundaries, refusing to bow to entitlement. Those were the lessons of that day. Sometimes the simplest actions, like letting the post office handle its own mail, speak louder than any confrontation ever could. And if you enjoyed watching me take on this wild HOA fiasco, make sure to hit that like button. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss another unbelievable Karen story. Now, I want to hear from you. What would you do if Karen tried to claim your mail? Drop a comment below and let's see who's bold enough to face her head on.